All right. The next one is from Ray's Guide, titled The Evolution of Pyro and Star Citizen. Not in a good way, I don't think, but let's see what he says.
Hello, this is Daniel Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. CIG has been slowly giving us more, presumably more detailed information about what will be happening in Pyro, and it has caused me to reflect on how Pyro has evolved over the course of the development of the game, and just as important, what...
And it had to evolve because of the way the development of the game evolved.
has driven that evolution. And in a disclaimer that I often have to make, I have no inside information about CIG. I am looking from the outside, like you, at CIG's behavior over the years. This is a story that lies at the intersection of game design and lore. CIG has a talented narrative team, and their contribution to the depth and cohesiveness of the verse is of inestimable value. But it is a weird dance. Art teams takes, frankly, needs to...
It's weird. The narrative team has created almost no depth to the verse because there is no verse to create depth in. But the stories that they're telling are interesting. But if their stories are always going to need to get retconned, then it's is that depth even there?
Direction from the narrative team. The narrative team takes direction from game design because ultimately that's what's being created, a game. Often narrative has to jump through some pretty huge hoops, such as when game design wanted to make an in-game explanation for the regen system. So let's dial all the way back to the original lore, when the lore team was first setting out the 100 star systems that the stretch goal...
Like, my first videos were about these star systems. The first videos on my main YouTube channel were reading the lore and like talking about, if you were a miner, is this a system you would spend time in? If you were a salvager, is this a system you would spend time in? If you wanted to be a pirate, would you pirate here? If you wanted to be like a mercenary and fight pirates, would you find enough pirate activity to go against them? And I was like going through all the systems and the lore that they gave us and determined, where you would kind of want to stake your claim or whatever.
Had said existed in the verse.
And there was a lot more diversity back then. Now you have Stanton and Red Stanton without an Armistice Zone.
Now, when you have to connect 100 dots, you can't make every one connect to every other one. That's too many lines and not particularly interesting. On the other hand, you can't just place them all in a line because that means to get from one end to the other is impossibly long.
Does anyone think that the current connections will at all remain the same? That this is even remotely final?
You need to make hubs to make it easier, but not too easy to get to all the interesting places in the UEE part of the verse. But if you give a system too many connections and too much importance, then it becomes a primary.
The only reason you can think that they're going to remain the same is because they're only going to make 5 systems and they're never going to make 100, right?
A node rather than a connection. So you had Pyro, waypoint for many, destination for none. All it needed was one barely functioning refuel and resupply point, and that was Ruin Station. Remember that this was before CIG committed to making seamless procedural planets.
Yep.
And not only that, but creating the 64-bit coordinate system and the engine for doing them well. Not as monotonous as No Man's Sky, nor as gimmicked as Starfield. All they need...
This was a system that was like, I'm just passing through. There's nothing here. But there might be some like stray ore that you can gather, and there might be a lot of wrecks that you could salvage, and there are no laws here. So this system will be camped, right? But it will not be lived in. Was the vibe.
At that time was to say there's no place to land on this planet, and there was no place to land on the planet. And so all they need...
Yeah, like in the previous iteration of what the game would look like, you would go up to a planet, but you wouldn't get any, I don't know, icon or anything that shows up that would say land. Whereas in ArcCorp, with the original demo that they did, you would just see the, like, hey, I would like to request landing, and then you would go through this cutscene to land. And, take that for what, how old school it is versus what we have today and how much freedom you have today. But let me tell you something. If they stayed with that, we would have 20 star systems right now.
It was a reason to say why there was no place to land on a planet, and saying that it would be fatal served nicely. But suddenly, with all the planets being procedural,
but we wouldn't have the FPS gameplay. We wouldn't have maybe the base building prioritized the way it is. You wouldn't have a lot of things. You say 100, not 20? No, because the city building takes forever. Look at how long it took them to redo Hurston, right? And that they already had a template.
adventuresome explorers would be able to visit them, all of them, particularly if it was for only short times and they were wise to stick to the dark side of the planet or the Lagrange point 2s. So suddenly, the explorable content of even a second-tier place like Pyro exploded. But fully explorable procedural planets done right in an MMO meant that a whole new magnitude of server technologies were needed to manage that scope.
They still haven't done that yet.
Client and server object container streaming, bind culling, and the huge step of creating and separating the replication layer, and now static server meshings, and further on, dynamic server meshing. These have stretched out the time to have Star Citizen ready for multiple star systems, and has raised the now proven worry that it might be a long time before we have more than one star system, but also maybe it might be a long time until we have more than two. The importance of Pyro.
I don't know. I think the thought process there seems quite a bit flawed. Is once you're capable of making one, you should be significantly faster in capability of making two. We know, let's just go through how they've done things. We know there was a time where the Montreal team spoke up and said, we are no longer spending our time in Pyro. We're going back to Stanton, because Pyro was nowhere near ready, not because it wasn't ready for them to work on it. It wasn't ready from a technical standpoint for us to be able to go there. So why would they waste their time doing a bunch of work that is not going to get seen by the players? So they spent time doing work that would, right? So this then extends the time in which we get to Pyro. So the reason why it's taking so long is not because of making a star system. The reason why it's taking so long is because they never had the tech that they wanted to make to get us there, because they didn't want us to go through a menu icon. They didn't want us to go through a cutscene. They didn't want us to go through a loading screen. So it is not the people who make the star systems. It is not the people who make the content in the star systems. It is the people who make the tech that have the people is the tech that has kept things behind, right? You do not have server meshing now. We have done one significant server meshing test. We have seen one at CitizenCon, and the significant server meshing test that we did not work out. It didn't work. And then we haven't had a test to see, did they fix any of those problems yet? So this is where we're at. I just think if server meshing comes online and you start going like Nyx only has one planet. So the pace in which we go to two additional star, the third star system should be significantly faster. Should being the key word here. But I think Ray's implying that we might be waiting forever after Pyro. He might be right from the standpoint of everyone who would be working on Nyx has to fix all the problems that have been created in Pyro.
To the game increased. It now had much larger shoes to fill. But fill with what? CIG started introducing us to the idea of permanent inhabitants of Pyro living in rustic, ramshackle colonization outposts.
Yeah.
But still remaining was the bit.
And I think this week's ISC is going to be mostly focused on that again.
Of lore that there was only one real station in Pyro, Ruin Station, and thus Pyro had to be a place of extreme self-reliance. If you travel more than one fill-up from Ruin Station, you would be needing to create or arrange with other players for your fuel supply, for example. The Starfare was going to be super relevant. Ships such as the Odyssey were designed and sold.
Well, yeah, designed and drawn. Let's stop here because I think Ray's probably talking more about this from most of his videos are about the game development side and management and whatever experiences he has in his career outside of video gaming, right? This system was the MMO system. This system was the PvP system. This system was the dark in the light and dark, right? And I think I'm really worried about what's going to happen here with everything that we're seeing and how they're putting the game, the Pyro system gameplay forward. I am a little bit worried. Contested zones are the thing that still got hope for me, but ship combat, ship PvP, their territory control from us not being a thing, territory control from all these it's all NPC space again. And it's like, I think they're missing the plot on why Pyro was something people were excited for. People were excited to make Pyro theirs. And I'm tired, personally, of Star Citizen making everything for them and not really anything for us, if you know what I mean. Like, Spider is another system, if you guys are familiar with. Yes, it's already established space before we ever got there. And I think that's where base building comes in, is they're trying to make something for us. And they have these huge spheres that are for us. So they're going to do it, or they want to do it. But I think there's part of the game that they're missing from that standpoint. And I think there's some stations that do need to be for us. I think that there's gameplay that needs to just be for us. There needs to be systems that are just for us. And Pyro is kind of supposed to be that system from the self-reliance standpoint that Ray brings up. So to bring it all the way back to what Ray just said that started this whole rant, is I think people were excited for Pyro because of the self-reliance idea. And now there's like 3 million stations, 100 billion planets, NPCs everywhere, fuel for all, and it just doesn't feel like they understood the assignment for the system. So it's weird, but that's how they're portraying it. Again, we have an ISC coming up this week. I don't know when this will go up on the React channel. It might be before, it might be after, but that's going to be a big decider of, did they understand the assignment of Pyro? And I think the assignment was the Wild West. We, like I see that in the Twitch chat, the Wild West, we kind of decide the rules there. But they decided that there's going to be 35 factions that decide the rules, and I have to go and do NPC bounty missions to be able to hang out in an area I want to hang out in or something. It's weird to me. So that was, again, Star Citizen allows their community to set the expectations for themselves way too much. Those are the ones I set for me. I could be totally wrong in that expectation. I don't read the lore. I don't care to read the lore, and maybe I should, but I don't think I should have to understand what Pyro was supposed to be. And for me, Pyro was supposed to be for us.
Based on their being able to achieve,
whether or not you were a PvPer or not, it was kind of supposed to be for us to decide the rules. And I still think we'll get that, but only on the planet's surface, I guess. Yeah, it's weird.
Achieve the radical self-reliance that would be needed for Pyro.
The Odyssey. This ship is something else, huh? I mean, supposedly it basically becomes your own personal space station. Imagine just taking this thing out as far as you can, dropping anchor and just living. I mean, that's it, Jimmy. The Whitleys just got their hands on an Odyssey prototype. I'm sure they wouldn't mind if I borrowed it, for a little sabbatical someplace. I don't know, like the Pyro system. Yeah, or someplace like that. I mean, someplace where no one will bother me.
A year later, Jack's Odyssey was gone, as well as the notion of Pyro being such an empty place. Dangerous and unpredictable for sure.
That was a really good cut. I don't remember that at all, and that makes me want the Odyssey. How fucked is that?
Sure, but not empty. Clearly, Pyro was moving in an entirely different direction. A key point in that change to Pyro was the first Xenothreat event.
To be clear, yes, Pyro has gone in a very different direction. We still don't know how free we will be. Where we know we will not be free is at space stations. What we know we will not have is that self-reliance. And I'm in agreement with Ray here, is that that's a drastic change. I don't know if he hates it or loves it, but I loved the idea of self-reliance. It's the thing that when I play the game, it's what I look to do as much as possible, is not buy stuff from the stores, find it, that kind of thing.
Followed by Siege of Orison. Xenothreat.
Yeah, the jump point having the green zone, but I mean, I don't see too much wrong with that, as long as the moment you leave it, you're out of a green zone. So
was a large, complex organization capable of launching major coordinated events with large ships. Of the choice of having them come from Terra, from Magnus, or from Pyro, only Pyro made any sense, but that meant that Pyro had a lot going on there, unless they wanted Pyro to be nothing but Xenothreat, and that would have provided little opportunity for many players. At the Pyro playground at the last CitizenCon, we were immersed, literally, in Checkpoint Station. Note Checkpoint, not Ruin, which, although having all the visual cues of Pyro teases in the past, was also pretty full-featured, having ASOP terminals, shops, repairs, commodities, etc. And now we've learned about more mission types and
felt like Stanton with graffiti.
PvP combat zones, more interesting interactions with factions, etc. We've learned that Rough and Ready deliberately being an imitation of Rest and Relax in Stanton. And then there are the things that I think we can expect to come from Stanton to Pyro. So, for example, considering the backstory and setup, wouldn't it make much more sense for Jumptown to be in Pyro rather than Stanton? If the security forces in Stanton knew of an automated drug lab, would they actually send a bunch of private citizens to maybe take care of it? Or
I wonder if Ray's aware, but they have removed the terminals from all of the drug labs. And in previous ISCs, they have shown, while saying that you will only be able to get certain commodities in Pyro, they showed drugs on the table in that scene. So they are very much hinting at drugs come from Pyro and go to Stanton, right?
Send in serious forces to smash it to bits. But in Pyro, to instead have multiple gangs fighting over the output makes complete sense. And then there's another possibility. Xenothreat-type events up to this point have all been about driving back offensive operations by Xenothreat. Now that Xenothreat's home base is within playable space, the whole realm of offensive operations to take out Xenothreat is available for event and mission design.
Sure.
But I think that there might have been another driving force behind the abandonment of the extreme self-reliance concept for Pyro. Too much Pyro, too few players. It is like the situation we often currently face with medical rescue beacons.
That's probably going to happen.
When you
and that's why I think they moved way more towards the casualizing of Pyro than prior. Because how many planets are there? 6? How many space stations are there? And if it is completely lawless, guess what's going to happen? No one's going to be there, because pirates, PvPers, and the like need people to fight and need reasons to fight. If they don't have that, then no one's going to be there. But that's a seal clubbing thing. That's the PvPers killing PvEers, right? And we always talked about how if you draw them in, you'll have that. But what's the real thing? What's the real thing here is they've never and have never indicated that there was going to be EVE-style territory control, open systems for you and your corporation to own and place down your flag or anything like that, right? I have never heard any indication that that would be a thing. We do understand that that might be a thing on the homestead side, on the planets and things like that. But they have never given indication that this would be a test gaming system, and that would be a Avenger Squadron system, and this would be a Shadow Moses system. We've never seen any indication of that whatsoever. But if Pyro was to be that successful PvP area, what you would need is a way to pit PvP org versus PvP org. A reason to run or own a system is really going to be the deciding factor of whatever nullsec ends up being, whatever no security, low so whatever they called it in the homestead thing. I don't know what will happen, but I know that if you don't give players agency, they're not going to play in the system, I don't think. And if all your system is bringing in seals to club, the seals will eventually stop coming, which means the PvPers will eventually leave and go where the seals are going or wherever they can find a fight.
Really need one, nobody is doing them close enough to have it be worthwhile for them. That's frustrating enough when the result is that you have to backspace to the regeneration point. But if you are stuck in space with no fuel, it is even more frustrating because there's no backspace option. So it seems that CIG came to the realization that there was a minimum set of player services that a solar system had to have available in order to be essentially a playable system for Star Citizen.
Yeah.
And that apparently includes food, HABs, medical, repair, and ASOP. So what do
I agree with this, right? Is in order for a system to be playable, because so many people would find themselves left out to dry, and if they ever create a system, like gameplay system, where, damn man, if you backspace and leave your ship out in the middle of nowhere, it stays there and you can't just claim it back so easily, that would be really, really punishing and like too much to be punishing. So I want Pyro to be self-reliant. I want it to be maybe fuel is significantly more expensive, but it's available, or I don't know. But I was really drawn to Pyro, and maybe as they make, maybe Pyro shouldn't have been the second system, because maybe as they made more and more and more and more star systems, you could have made a very empty Pyro with planets that you couldn't fly down to because they were so bad for a ship to be there, and the solar flares and this and that. And you could have made this somewhat empty playground, because that's what they called it. They called it Pyro Playground. And the reason why you would call it a playground is because on playgrounds you get imaginative, right? You're pretending. Like, remember being a kid on a playground? It was just some monkey bars, but what were you pretending to climb? Were you climbing a mountain? Were you climbing a building? You know what I mean? I don't know what your imaginations were like when you were kids, but I was pretending to be someone, be something, do other things than climbing around on monkey bars. I wasn't just living in the moment, climbing on those monkey bars, right? So it's a lot of fights on the playground too, sure. But that's, I think, what they meant by playground is you were going to kind of make this your own. And so far, their communication hasn't implied that at all.
I think of where the evolution of Pyro has taken us. Well, Pyro now reminds me of those mirror universe episodes of Star Trek, where the actors get to wear altered costumes and play the evil versions of themselves. Well, that is what Pyro seems to me to resemble, the mirror universe of Stanton. The elements are the same, their arrangements are similar, but the clothes are different and the plot elements are different. Is that a bad thing? No, the Mirror Universe episodes are among the fan favorites, and the actors seem to really relish creating them. But it does mean that I may have to go back and revisit some of the videos that I made when Extreme Self-Reliance was the model for Pyro, where I asked questions such as, are you a Pyro player? And what a Pyro fleet or a Pyro org would have to look like. Because the new answers are still different, but less completely different. And now for an update on...
If you guys are familiar with EVE at all, look at wormhole corporations versus regular corporations. Like, people like to live in wormhole space because it's harder and it's more of a challenge and things like this. Will Pyro deliver that challenge? You know? I don't know. And right now it's a bigger system. They did make it seem like you're going to have to refuel to get across the system. So fuel will still be a thing. But it just comes down to they've given us very little reason to be confident that they're good at making video game stuff. They've given us every reason to be confident that they're good at making beautiful stuff. So I think right now what we're dealing with is we don't know anything. We only see what Jared's showing us. And we don't have a lot of confidence in them. So we're always questioning everything. And that could probably be really frustrating for them. But it's the bed that they made, so...
On our ship giveaways. To start with, we have the special membership level to cover costs of doing live coverage of CitizenCon, with its own giveaway for Hull C, the colossal cargo container carrying craft. And although I am still expecting, almost certain, to make the trip to Manchester, the giveaway, just to be sure, will still happen if for unforeseen circumstances the live coverage has to be remote live coverage. Plus, we have our regular Grow the Channel ship giveaway for the Zippy Zazzy Active Zephyr, the Zeus 2 cargo, which we're still just waiting on for the subscriber goal, as well as the marvelous multiplayer multi-role mining meta, the Arasta. One entry per video. Just be a member for automatic entry with each video, or subscribe and comment, somehow including the secret word. And the secret word for this hypo Star Trek episode that I think Pyro will feel like. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.
I like knowing the secret word at the end. It's fun. I never thought that I would fall for that stuff, but it is fun. It's what is Pyro? What is Pyro now? That's really what it comes. It's like, who is Pyro for? Is probably a better question. Who's Pyro for? Like, I think every PvP org was waiting for Pyro, and now they're sitting here going, is this even for me? What do I do here? What are we going to do? And yeah, is it for everyone? I mean, it shouldn't be, right? If only a certain type of person NPC-wise lives there, you would think it would be the same way for players, but I don't know. It's kind of a bummer. But it's okay to be bummed right now and be excited later when they deliver on it, and it is for somebody, and it is for you and not for me or whatever, right? So I just hope they do enough to draw us in that Stanton gets a little less populated, and there's that risk versus reward factor with Pyro. I think to minimum viable, be a successful system, the risk versus reward game has to play out well. So the whatever rewards for contested zones they've been talking about, whatever commodities that are in Pyro that are not in Stanton, that game that sandbox part of the game needs to be really, really fun. And if it is, Pyro will be successful.